No, I mean, we're in the middle of really where it's happening in the software industry. And it's all about people. And in spite of the fact this is a geek event, it's about human beings. And my good friend Michael here, for the past many years, has been building community here in Öresund, starting with a lot of different kinds of gatherings in bringing us together. And I am unbelievably pleased to be part of this first-year anniversary event. I was here about a year ago at one of the several grand openings of Food Cafe. And it looks like a success. And I think this can be a core part of what defines us as a community in the Öresund area. And I think we owe it to the leadership of Michael here. I want to thank him for the past year with a round of applause. I mean, to me, that's what this is all about. Well, that and the beer. And, I have to have a presentation in the meantime to keep you entertained. And a few of you have been playing a game, which you can get on iTunes, by the way. If you have an iPad, you can download that game. But my name is Jim Coplien, and I'm from Denmark, and I haven't been in this part of Denmark here in quite a few months, so it's good to be back. But I'm going to tell you a little story here about something called Scrum patterns. Oh, the cameraman is saying, don't move out of the camera focus. Okay, that way, that way, that way. Put an X on the floor here. Oh, I love to move around during these talks, but he says I can move back and forth. All right. So, yeah, I'm a certified Scrum trainer. We have, how many other certified Scrum trainers are there here? Oh, we have two. One way in the back, too. Okay. So, I've been part of the Scrum community for I don't know how long. We'll get a little more into that story about the origins of Scrum here in a second. But one of the things we've been doing as part of the Scrum community is coming together in community to write patterns. So how many of you think you know what a pattern is, more or less? I'm not going to get into pattern theory, but if you kind of know, that's good enough. A pattern, the idea comes from architecture, from real architecture. An architect named Christopher Alexander. And he would go out and look at beautiful buildings and say, this room has light on two sides. That's a pattern. Varied ceiling heights. That's a pattern. Entrance transitions. These are patterns that contribute to beauty and quality of life in buildings and communities. So us software folks got together. Do you know it's about 21 years ago this year? The Patterns Conference is taking place in Allerton Park this month. It's the 20th Pattern Conference there. So they've been around a while. We said we want beauty in software. We want beautiful interfaces. We want end users to have the same experience of architectural joy in interacting with the architecture of our systems as someone has a sense of comfort or of being hygge when one comes into a room. And we adopted these ideas called patterns from Christopher Alexander, and the rest is kind of history. And then the patterns people kind of became nerds. And patterns became a cheap path to publication, and it was a lot of technical stuff. And the whole human agenda and this notion of beauty and the quality without a name, this sense of beauty, of wholeness, of awe, of humanity got lost. And I said, well, screw this. It's time to pick up the baton and start again and go back to the human origins and ask, what should we be talking about? So there's a lot of these same ideas that you find in patterns and in Scrum. Both of them come from the Dokyo, the Tao Te Ching, an ancient Oriental classic. So if you trace back Jeff Sutherland's ideas, a lot of these he gets from Nonaka-sensei and from Japanese culture, but a lot of them he also gets from Buddhism. And if you trace patterns back, it's very clear this is where Alexander got them. I've done a lot of work with Christopher Alexander over the years, and it's very clear he got this idea from the Dokyo. So there's a lot in common in the first place between patterns and Scrum. So there were a lot of people asking me to become a Scrum trainer to drink the Kool-Aid for many years, and I kind of pushed it off because it's kind of this pyramid scheme and it's all about certification, and I was more into the human side, but eventually I drank the Kool-Aid because I thought I can do more work on the inside than I can from the outside. So I go around certifying people, and if you're in one of my classes, you can get this wonderful certificate. And I do this all over the world. This is from one of my students in Finland named Moilanti. So I travel in many lands, and it's not just about do this dance and you'll do better software. It's not just about feeling good. This is about radically changing the way you view the world. I've been doing courses in Turkey for a while, and Tolga says, "Sir, you taught us Kaizen, change for the better, and said spread the word." That's what we did, and the nation is Kaizening right now. That was June 4th. So we have 3 questions every morning. What have I done yesterday? What will I do today? And what's blocking me? Type, you have all the answers. Type, right? But no worries. We Turks run 10-year length sprints, so the sprint retrospective meeting time box is longer proportionally. And we have a huge chapula. You know what a chapula is? It's a Foo Fighter. You can look it up when you go home. So when I'm looking at Scrum, it's about something much deeper than productivity. Productivity is the #1 cause of waste. It's about value, and it's about human value. It's about, what do you value? Do you know what your company values? What I want is for us to be focused on value and to be optimizing this value. So I put together a community and invited some folks from around the industry. Actually, I invited all the Scrum trainers, and I went to all the Scrum lists and said, hey, we're going to get together and take the great ideas from Scrum that come from real experience, not something you learned in a book, but something you've done that you can point to, that you've done 3 times and it's worked. And we know why it works. And we know it's a good thing. And we're going to write these up. We're going to say, if you have this situation and you have this problem, then here are some things you need to analyze. Here are some trade-offs. And these are really tough problems, but we know the solution. And here is a solution for you. And once you have the solution, here's why the world is a better place. Here's why your Scrum is a better place. So a pattern is a solution to a problem in a context. And what these conferences are about, the conferences are called PLOPs, or workshops, pattern languages of programs. And they're small communities, 10, 20, 30 people who come together, and we write patterns in writers' workshops, just like the poetry people do. You get together and you critique each other's works. We're building a body of literature, and we take the word literature seriously. So this isn't your standard conference documentation. Now, this has created a whole culture, a community of trust where we come together to grow our body of knowledge about Scrum. And people come with some ideas they want to test out. They come with documents that are not very well written, and we want them to feel secure in having them reviewed in a community of peers. So the documents initially are only accessible to the people who come together every year. We come together every year at Helene Bath Hotel up on the north coast of Denmark, have these writers' workshops, and then we destroy all the works at the end, except the ones that have been reviewed and that people are happy to share. with the world. So at the end of the workshop, here is the ceremonial burning of the manuscripts. You can see the high priests and priestesses of Scrumplop here burning the manuscripts around the fire. So we have fun. And all right. And there's some really interesting stuff. Patterns are simple, but profound. So we had been writing patterns for a couple of days, and then we wanted to explore this concept called pattern languages. So patterns can be organized according to a grammar. And if you walk through the grammar and you apply patterns in the right order, you can build kind of a sentence. And the sentence is a Scrum team, a Scrum organization. So there's millions and millions and millions of ways of combining patterns to make a great Scrum team. So in this little meeting, we sat around. Here's the pattern language of the very first Scrum. These are the patterns that Jeff Sutherland used to put together the very first Scrum. So Jeff walked us through and said, here's how we did this. We started with a development team. There was a vision. It was a small team made of producers. It was a stable team. We had a circle of trust. The team was co-located. It was a cross-functional team. They were given autonomy. They were allowed to self-organize. Then we started getting sprints, and the rest kind of comes together. And the self-organization and the Kaizen take off. So here we have a vision of how the first Scrum team came together. Now for most of you, it's go to a course, come back, and we hit the ground running Monday morning. And that's not agile, right? That's not how it happens. So we've been to Helsinki, we've been to Finland, we've been, let's jump to Japan. So going one step back from Jeff Sutherland, who's commonly credited with as being the inventor of Scrum, together with Ken Schwaber, there's a guy named Nonaka-sensei, and actually he's a professor at Harvard? Yeah. He's Japanese-born, and he gave the keynote at the Scrum Gathering in January back in Japan. And he gave this little history of Scrum. So this is Nonaka's history of Scrum. Nonaka started with a paper in Harvard Business Review called the New Product Development Game. How many of you have read that? It's probably a good thing to look up. If you want to really understand Scrum, understand where it comes from. There's a lot of things in there that you probably maybe wouldn't even like. Scrum is about everybody doing everything all the time. There's no testers in Scrum. There's no designers in Scrum. There's no coders in Scrum. You're responsible for everything. And there's no waterfall steps. It's not that you do analysis and design and implementation and test. Maybe you write the tests first. Who writes the tests? Who writes the tests? Product owner writes the tests. Product owner is the one who understands what the requirements are. And we'll be using these in order to gauge what the team is delivering at the end. You don't have the team members write the tests. That's mental masturbation. That becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, let's see. Let me write the test for this, and then I'll write the code. I wonder if the test will pass. Product owners write tests. Now, yeah. Can your product owner write a test? Who does the screen designs? Who does the interaction design and navigation trees? Who does navigation trees? That's product owner. Who does interaction design? That's the developer. So there's a lot of things. If you go and you look how Scrum really works, it's not the stuff you're reading in the books and that you're hearing from a lot of the Scrum trainers. And you certainly don't find it in the Scrum Guide. Anyhow, back to a little bit of history. Nonaka started with this paper called the New Product Development Game. Everybody doing everything all the time. And then he had this other book called The Knowledge Creating Company. And then he says, then this Jim Coplien guy came out in 1993 and had this concept of patterns. And indeed, I didn't know anything about Scrum at the time, but I've been doing research and looking at what really works in development organizations. And we had written this up as patterns. So what are the patterns? Developer owns process. Few roles. Co-located team. And I mean, it's a perfect parallel to what we found today in Scrum. One of the patterns we published very early was daily stand-up. And in fact, where we see that Jeff would get the daily Scrum is from these patterns that were initially published back in 1993. And there were some drafts circulating on the web, and Jeff picked those up. That's where daily stand-ups come from in Scrum. Now, Jeff and I didn't get together again until many, many years later, maybe about 6 or 7 years ago. And for the past 4 years, we've been working together on these patterns with a team of about 13 other people. So we see some other things here. There's a silly thing called the Agile Manifesto that came along later. Let's be clear. Agile comes from Scrum. Scrum doesn't come from Agile. And Agile is not the important part of Scrum. TPS is, the Toyota Production System. Agile is kind of a very modern, superficial, unproven set of cute things that keep people from having to take responsibility for stuff. Scrum is about accountability, responsibility, planning, discipline. It's not laid-back California guitar playing programming. So many people misunderstand this. But you will never see that by looking at the books or looking at the Scrum Guide. So we said we need to go back to these roots and communicate them and build this body of literature that says what Scrum is about. And that's what these patterns are about. So they were there from very, very early on. One of the first patterns books, which was by Mike Beadle and Ken Schwaber, had a pattern approach. And Mike Beadle was a patterns guy, and he's still working with us today. Now, Nonaka has updated this. He has a new book out on collaborative software development, which is essentially Scrum, but it's only in Japanese so far. So we're coming full circle here. So that's Japan. Now, Jeff Sutherland himself, if you go to his webpage, talks about origins of Scrum. He says, the Scrum Daily Meeting derives from the Borland Quattropo paper by Jim Coplien, which was written up in these patterns. And now Jeff has been writing more and more about patterns on his website. And in fact, at Agile 2013, he just gave a presentation on his pattern language for hyperproductivity. And it's about 9 patterns that you put together that he feels if you do these together, you can take someone who doesn't know something about Scrum and get them productive very fast. And you can take people who know Scrum well and get them to a point of being hyper-productive. When Jeff teaches Scrum now, he teaches Scrum by the patterns. So it's not a bunch of rules. It's not follow these rules. It's here are these patterns, these human things that set a vision of what we could be and how we could get here. Here are the forces we need to resolve. Figure it out. Resolve them rather than following a bunch of rules. And I won't read all of this. He starts with Mike Beadle, who wrote some of the original patterns. But let me focus on this last paragraph here. He says, Scrum should be fast, easy, and fun. He says, while the Scrum Guide provides the basic rules of Scrum, the patterns amplify the guide by showing teams how to solve problems in a specific context. Scrum should be fast, easy, and fun. For many new Scrum Masters, it's slow, hard, and painful. Using proven patterns for starting up a new team or accelerating an existing team can rapidly eliminate a lot of Scrum Master headaches. It's particularly true if you can gain this deep understanding. So, how many of you use the Scrum Guide? How many of you have referenced the Scrum Guide? Have seen the new Scrum Guide? Came out about 2 weeks ago. Okay, this is about what I expected, and it's okay. For those of you who read the Scrum Guide, what's it say about velocity? The word velocity doesn't appear in the Scrum Guide. It Jeff Sutherland is saying increasing velocity is what Scrum is all about, and it doesn't appear in the Scrum Guide. How are you going to understand Scrum? How many of you are on a Scrum team? What's the purpose of the daily stand-up?
It's to talk about what you've done, what your obstacles are, and what you're doing.
Well, that's what you do there, but why do we do this? What's the purpose of the daily stand-up? Why was the daily stand-up invented?
I don't know.
So why do you do it? You believe in things you don't understand. You may suffer. Stevie Wonder. I want you to understand. I don't want you to follow the methodologists who say, just trust me and this will be okay. I want you to understand with a passion why you do what you do. Otherwise, you're not self-managing. You're not self-directed. You're just following another methodology. What's the purpose of the daily Scrum? He doesn't get any beer. The word commitment doesn't appear in Scrum, which is interesting. Oh, we all feel good. Laid back California guitar playing programming. No.
Based on what you've said, it sounds like it's about taking responsibility for what you do.
You're getting close. I mean, when someone's here said responsibility, you're getting close. You all know what sprint planning is, right? What the daily Scrum is sprint planning in the small. You replan the sprint every day. That's what the daily stand-up is. It's replanning. This is the agile part. You're all saying you're agile. It's the team coming together and saying, we suck here. How are we going to fix this? How are we going to change how we're doing things in order to achieve the sprint goal? That's what the daily stand-up is about. That's kind of 9 basic concepts in Scrum. You know, there's the 3 roles, the 3 ceremonies, and the 3 artifacts. That's one of the 9. And you know, I can probably hit every one of the 9 and ask you, what's the purpose of the product owner? What's the purpose of the Scrum Master? Why do we have a product backlog? Do you know why? Do you know where these come from? Do you know what purpose they serve? That's where we're going in the patterns, is to document this so you understand. It's not just blindly following some rules. I want you to use your common sense. But common sense is so uncommon. You know, there are no Scrum police. There's no one who's going to come after you and check if you're following the Scrum Guide, right? This is about getting value. I want you to get value. What do you value? That's what Scrum is about. Pardon?
Why is it not a method? You said it's not just another method.
So a method is a collection of rules and tools that tell you how to do things. There's very, very little of that in Scrum. Scrum is a very high-level, superficial process framework. But it doesn't say anything about how to build software, for example. There's no pair programming in Scrum. There's no test-driven development in Scrum. There's no software in Scrum. Scrum has nothing to do with software. It doesn't tell you how to do things. It's a framework, not a method. So if you look at something like Prince 2, which is, again, a framework, but there's a lot of methodological parts to it. It will tell you you have to have all of these things lined up and very, very highly constrained. Now, Prince 2 has this footnote. We won't go there. That allows you to cheat. But no, I mean, if you look at Scrum at its core, it's only about 2 things. So Jeff says Scrum comes from the Toyota production system, which most people call lean. And how many of you know the House of Lean? You've seen this big picture with the House of Lean? Yeah, it's crap. Toyota redefined lean, or Toyota production system, back in 2001 to be only 2 things. One is it's all about people, and the other is Kaizen mind, continuous improvement. If you're doing those two things, the rest kind of happens. But it's not a method. It isn't something given to you to do. It sets a framework that you need to fill in. You figure out what to do. I have a good friend. His name is Andreas Tomasini. How many, you know Andreas? Great Scrum trainer. You see, he is a certified Scrum trainer, isn't he? German guy. And coach. Yeah, he's a really great guy. And on his byline in his mail, he says, I don't know if it's Scrum or Agile. Agile is not something you do. It's something you are. He's wrong. It's not something you are. It's something you become. Agile is about becoming, not being. Methods are about what you are or what you do. Methods are about what you do. A step further is what you are. And Scrum is about becoming. And this is a word that Nonaka-sensei uses a lot, becoming. It's about the becoming. What's that mean? That's Kaizen, continuous improvement. How many of you have had at least a factor of 10 increase in your velocity in the past year? And that's what Scrum is. If you're not getting that, I don't know what you're doing wrong. I mean, that's what a good Scrum team should be doing. All right. So what we do is we come together and we write patterns, and we put them together in a pattern language. Maybe I should go ahead and show you a pattern first. This is a pattern that Jeff wrote, and it's called Illegitimus non interruptus. Most of them don't have Latin titles. Most of them are very simple things like Daily Scrum or Scrum Master. This is an interesting one. How do you handle bugs in Scrum? How many of you use Jira? Jira really sucks. What do you do when a bug comes up in Scrum? When a bug comes up, you fix it now. Whatever you're doing, you drop it and you work on the bug now. Bugs are always top priority. I don't care if it came from 2 sprints ago, or from this sprint, or from the field, or from something you're working on. Fixing bugs is #1 priority. If you can't fix it in 4 hours, you go to the product owner. And the product owner makes a decision. Do you continue working on it? Or does it go where? In Jira? How many of you have a bug tracking system? Get rid of it. We don't track bugs, we fix them now. And if you can't fix it now, where does it go? On the product backlog. If developers start hiding them in a bug tracking system, no one will ever find them there. And they grow, and eventually you die of technical debt. They go where it's visible. Scrum is all about transparency. No bug tracking systems. Stop your bug tracking systems. Use the product backlog and fix bugs now. Now this ups the ante. This says we're going to look at history and say, how often have we had to fix bugs? How much time does that take per sprint? And we make a buffer. And when a bug comes up, the product owner does triage and says, do we fix this now or does it go on the product backlog? If we fix it now, it goes in this buffer. The team estimates it, and we take that much time out of the buffer. If another bug comes up, it goes in the buffer. If the buffer overflows, you abort the sprint, management is notified, you will not ship, and you have a sprint planning meeting. Tough love. Scrum is all about controlled failure. Because there is no failure, only feedback. And human nature is to prevent failure from happening. Oh, we have to ship, we have to ship. No, you don't. Because if you're shipping crap, in the end you'll die. So at a time you have to stop, breathe, check the process. This is how Toyota works. In Toyota, any engineer can pull a cord, called the Anden cord, stop the line. The team has 10 minutes to find and fix the problem. If they can't find and fix it in 10 minutes, the whole factory shuts down. Management comes down out of their offices. They roll up their sleeves and they fix the problem now. That's Scrum. Not, oh, file the bug in Jira. We'll look at it later. Now, you're not going to find that in the Scrum Guide. But here's, from the inventor of Scrum, how we handle bugs. Now, that's one pattern. It doesn't show up on this page. But here are some of the patterns that we put together to build what's called a value stream, the way we deliver value to the market. We start with a product roadmap that gives us a release plan. Now, we can organize that either by net present value or something called high value first. This is kind of a clever trick. That gives us a product backlog, which comprises product backlog items. That's estimated in estimation points. And we have several different ways of calculating velocity. That gives us a sprint backlog, which we take into a sprint. And there's many, many paths through this graph. So if you're building a Scrum team from scratch, you start here. The very first thing you build is a value stream. Now, I do a lot of consulting in companies. Think of your company. If I went to your product managers and said, how many products do you have? What would they answer? You get it. Usually I go and I'll get 5 different answers from 5 different product managers, and they vary by an order of magnitude. People have no idea how many products they have. That means they can't manage their revenue. That means they can't manage their market. And it's because they're thinking in terms of the engineering. They're not thinking in terms of value. They're not looking outward. They're contemplating their navel. They're engineering focused rather than market focused. Value streams come first. Okay, now we know our value streams. Now we know our products. Let's make a roadmap. What are the possible decision points? And that's what a roadmap is. It's a map. When I come to this intersection, I can either go left or I can go right. A road map. So I have a map of the decisions. How many of you have heard the term defer decisions to the last responsible moment? What's that mean? Does that mean defer decisions? See, that's what the extreme programming people and the agile people will tell you. No, what does it mean? It means pull all the decisions forward. Make a map. Understand how they depend on each other. Line up your decisions. Line up your ducks. And then when you go into the sprint, you make the decisions. But the last responsible moment comes very, very, very early. The last responsible moment is the moment beyond which your ability to make that decision is taken away. You want to pull these forward. The term comes from lean, and it means exactly the opposite of what the extreme programming people tell you it does. There's so much bullshit out there. All right. You apply these like building blocks to your organization, one at a time. And now I'm building a process. I'm building my team. I'm building my value stream. But one size does not fit all. So Scrum is based on inspecting and adapting. What do I need to do now? What can I pull from my toolkit in order to get higher value? It's not something I look up in some book somewhere. And by the way, the one thing that I want you to remember from this talk, it's true about these patterns, but in general, it's true about most things that you read. The goal of a book is not to give you knowledge. You see, you've all been through schooling and methodology training and read a lot of books, and you think there's truth in there. You were probably born a great programmer. If we'd let you to your own instincts, you'd probably be a great small talk programmer without getting any training. But you've gotten a computer science degree or an informatics degree or gone to some consulting school or something. And your ability to think has been destroyed. What patterns are there for is to reawaken in you the realization of your very whole sane self that knows instinctively how to do this stuff right. And to strip off all the years of crap that training has layered on you. Is to get you in touch with common sense, which again is so uncommon. So patterns are not there as another method for you to follow. They're about getting you in touch with yourself. As a team, not as an individual, but as a team, figuring out what the right direction is to go. So here's our team. These are the people who are getting together continuously and working on these patterns year-round. But we have kind of one big ceremony every year up at Helene. So this is Lachlan. He's our Australian. Gabriella Benefield, probably the best product owner trainer in the world. Veli-Pekka, he's one of our two Finns. Where's the other Finn? Vida. Da Beetle, who wrote the first Scrum book together with Ken Schwaber. There's Jeff, of course. There's Gertrude Bjornving. She's very, very strong on requirements. Dina Fries, she's our token kind of academic and troublemaker. She keeps us honest. Adamar from Portugal. Evan, kind of an artist from Colorado. Cesario from the Netherlands. Kyo Harada. Harada-san is from Japan. He's doing a lot of work inside of Toyota. Neil Harrison, who co-authored the Organizational Patterns book with me back about 9 years ago. So it's a great team, and we've really become a team, and we've worked on this now for 4 years. And hopefully within 2 or 3 years, we're going to be able to produce a book. In the meantime, it's all there for you on the web. So, we're not in this to make a money. We're not a business. We're a community. And, one of the reasons I'm here is to engage you guys into community, because, we need all the input and all the help we can get. A few years ago, I guess it was back in 2010, there was some funding that came down from the EU here in Denmark to kind of prop up the IT economy over in Jylland. There's a high-tech sector there. And they had a 2-year program to introduce Scrum and Agile into the tech sector there using patterns. And I was brought in to kind of run the technical part of that program. One of the clients who we dealt with was a company called Skov. Now this is someone who I've always wanted to work with as a client because they're about pigs and chickens. So they make air conditioning, heating, ventilation systems for pig barns and chicken barns. And very sophisticated software control. And they were struggling a little bit with their Scrum. And so he said, well, let's pull out the organizational patterns and see what we can make work here. So they're a fairly large company. They're 250 people at this location over in Glungor. But they're part of Big Dutchman, which is a German company, which is about 1,500, 2,000 employees. And they market worldwide to anywhere where there's poultry or livestock being raised. And so their software people are going to Scrum. So one of the techniques we have is going into the organization and finding out what patterns do you have now. Now this is how it all started. When I was back in Bell Laboratories, back in, it was very shortly after 1990, is it that long ago? I guess so, yes. The ISO 9000 craze was on, and I said, ISO 9000 clearly can't work. What does work? And we went in and we made empirical models of organizations in a role-playing exercise. And I used that to make some models of the organization and then take those models back to the teams and say, what do you guys think? And they'd reflect on these and then change the structure of their organization to become more effective. And the way they'd improve the structure is by using these patterns. And so this is a real case study where we did a pattern analysis, which is a role-playing exercise with 5 of the team members from the company. This was back, in 2009. And they ended up with a 15-page report that we developed for them, saying, here are some recommendations, looking at you from the outside, in what we feel you're missing in terms of the patterns that make an effective Scrum team. So this is what the analysis looks like. It's based on the roles in the organization. So here's the software development, here's user testing, software coordinator, project manager, and so forth. And each one of these represents an index card. And during the role-playing exercise, they fill out the index card with the dependencies to other roles in the organization. And then they'll say how strong those dependencies are. And so when we're done with the exercise, I say thank you very much, and I collect the cards, and I take them home, and I have a hockey table. And I lay out the cards on the hockey table, and I connect them together with rubber bands, and the strength of the rubber bands correspond to the strength of the interactions between the roles. And then I have a jar of protons, and I glue a proton to the center of each card so that each card is positively charged, so they tend to repel each other. And then I turn on the hockey table, and the cards kind of settle into a position, and I take a picture, and I get this. So we can see that user testing and humidity control from Spain are very close to each other. They have a close dependency with each other and not much dependency on anyone else. We can also see that software development is right in the middle here. And so this is a picture of the structure of the organization. Now, why is software in the middle? Because everyone's asking them to do things and they're in burnout. Ooh, that's information. Now, we have, there's some metrics. I won't go into these. Very, very good communication relative to other organizations. Very good role normatization. There's a lot of measures we can take. But the main thing is going through the patterns. Do you have community of trust? Well, it seems to be true within the team, but how about between the team and management? Is there trust there? You have to have trust to run Scrum. Don't find that in many methodologies. Work queue. Do you have a work queue? Do you have stable releases, name stable bases? Do you engage customers? No, Big Dutchman's not an open partner. You have a problem here. Size of the organization? Yeah, the team is small, few roles, yes. Informal labor plan. Is the team self-organizing? Now, these are patterns from back in 1993. The year Scrum was born. These are Scrum things. And we go in and we analyze organizations using these patterns and say, well, what do you think? How can you improve? And then kind of say, here's what we see. And here are their conclusions. Okay, there's, their daily Scrums would go on for half an hour sometimes. They don't have a dedicated Scrum Master. They don't have a burn down chart. They have a separate testing team instead of the testing just being something that developers do on the team. So they learned a lot by going through this analysis. Now, these were people who had been through Scrum training before. But again, just by reading the books or getting the certification or looking at the documents, you're probably not going to understand Scrum well enough to do it. This question about what's the purpose of the daily Scrum? I haven't had a single person answer that right in 3 months. Scrum, as it's being learned out there, is a myth. We're trying to drive into what Jeff and Ken intended, driving all the way back to Nonaka-sensei, the Toyota production system, and even deeper roots. So I spend about 2 months a year in Japan looking at that community, saying, what are the deep cultural underpinnings here that we depend on? So going forward, your organization can start applying patterns immediately. They're free and public at scrumplop.org. And they're growing every day. We're refining them. So, they may change from day to day as we get more refinement. There's several certified facilitators who can run a retrospective for your Scrum organization. Come in and do this role play analysis. and give you these models and help you reflect. It's a great way to do a retrospective. There's some tools that generate these pictures. I might consider, getting the tool to you if you're interested. I think it's production grade by now. But the main value in the patterns is a foundation for dialogue. Get your team around these patterns. Get them reading them. Pick one up and say, hey, should we be applying this? And I mean, no fault if you don't. There are no Scrum police. But this is about thinking and caring and becoming, not about doing. Now on to the important stuff. Thank you very much.